Before we continue, just take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Everything here is built on real historical survival, not modern hype or gear marketing. Today's topic covers a truth history repeats relentlessly. Far more people died from preventable mistakes than from hunger or thirst. Starvation and dehydration are slow killers. Mistakes are fast, they compound, and once they begin, they're difficult to reverse. Across wars, expeditions, migrations, and disasters, the same errors appear again and again, leaving a trail of survivors who didn't die because they lacked resources, but because they made the wrong choices early. Panic-driven movement destroyed more lives than scarcity. One of the deadliest mistakes in survival situations is moving too much, too fast, for the wrong reasons. Panic convinces people that motion equals progress. History shows the opposite. Lost soldiers, stranded travelers, and displaced civilians, they repeatedly exhausted themselves trying to escape uncertainty. They walked through heat, cold, darkness, and unfamiliar terrain without any clear direction, and in doing so, they burned calories, lost fluids, and really increased their risk of injury. Survivors, by contrast, often stayed put. They stabilized, you see. They waited for daylight, better weather, or just clearer information. Hunger didn't kill the movers. Fatigue did. Exposure did. Even something like a twisted ankle did. Ignoring exposure while chasing solutions, that was a common mistake. Exposure killed faster than starvation in nearly every historical environment. Cold, heat, wind, and moisture, they dismantle the body long before food ever becomes an issue. Yet, many people ignored exposure while focusing on long-term solutions. They searched for routes instead of shelter. They pushed toward objectives instead of stopping to dry clothing or regulate temperature. In cold climates, sweating during exertion was fatal. Wet clothing robbed heat relentlessly. In hot climates, moving during peak heat accelerated dehydration beyond recovery. Survivors prioritized microclimate control first. Shelter, shade, windbreaks, and dry clothing mattered more than distance covered. Overconfidence in tools and plans was, a common pitfall. Another recurring mistake was trusting tools or plans beyond their limits. Maps were treated as reality. Equipment was assumed reliable. Plans were followed even as conditions changed. History is full of examples where navigation instruments failed, vehicles broke down, or supply caches were missed. Those who adapted survived. Those who clung to the original plan often didn't. Survivors, treated plans as temporary. They watched conditions, not assumptions. Tools were aids, not authorities. Failing to stop early enough, that's one of the most subtle but deadly errors. Delaying rest and shelter was a common mistake. People consistently pushed past safe limits, believing they could stop after the next ridge or before dark. That extra effort, more often than not, consumed the energy needed to build shelter, start fires, or even think clearly. Darkness, cold, or storms arrived faster than expected. Historical survivors, they stopped early. They accepted a bit of inefficiency in exchange for a margin of safety. They understood that stopping with energy left was, much safer than arriving completely exhausted. Poor camp discipline, honestly, caused cascading failure. Many survival situations, surprisingly, deteriorated at camp, not while on the move. Fires were built too large or in the wrong places. Food was mishandled. Gear was left exposed to the elements. Waste attracted animals, or worse, spread illness. These weren't, dramatic mistakes. They were actually just lapses in routine. Groups that survived, enforced boring discipline, drying clothing every single day, storing food with care, maintaining their tools, establishing regular watch routines. These habits honestly prevented small issues from turning into lethal problems. Social breakdown, well, it proved deadlier than hunger. Survival was hardly ever a solo affair, and social failure killed just as surely as exposure. Arguments over leadership, unequal work, or resource allocation, they fractured groups. History shows that groups with clear roles and shared routines survived longer, even when they had fewer resources. Groups that allowed resentment to grow, well, they collapsed quickly. Survivors prioritized cooperation over comfort. They resolved conflict early or enforced structure to prevent it. Delaying signaling or rescue attempts was, a common pitfall. Some people waited too long to signal for help, maybe fearing embarrassment or just hoping conditions would improve. On the other hand, others signaled too early and, unfortunately, exhausted their resources. Survivors signaled deliberately. They conserved energy and chose times and locations where signals would be, most effective. They treated rescue as a process, not a single event. The lesson history never stops teaching. Hunger and thirst take time, and mistakes act immediately. They drain energy, reduce options, and accelerate exposure. The survivors history remembers weren't extraordinary. They avoided common errors. They moved less. They stopped early. They protected their bodies. They enforced routine. They adapted plans without hesitation. Survival isn't about heroic endurance, it's about not making things worse. If you value survival knowledge grounded in real history, subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who thinks survival is about grit alone. The difference between life and death has always been quieter than we want to believe.